Friday night in Coronado was alive with its usual hum. Neon lights flickered across the street. Music thumped softly from corner bars, and the smell of salty ocean air mingled with fried food and beer. Natalie Reeves slid open the glass door of the Anchor, a popular local bar near the Naval Amphibious Base. The crowd was a mix of off-duty sailors, tourists, and locals unwinding after the week. She walked in quietly, her hoodie pulled slightly over her hair, backpack slung over one shoulder. Few noticed her as she made her way to a booth in the corner. Natalie wasn't looking for attention. In fact, she avoided it whenever she could. But despite her casual clothes and quiet demeanor, there was an unmistakable aura about her. She had trained for years under conditions most people couldn't imagine. Every muscle remembered the discipline of cold, wet mornings in Coronado Bay, the endless runs along sandy beaches, the brutal hours of Bud S training. And her eyes, calm, sharp, and unflinching, gave away just enough that someone who truly knew what they were seeing might feel a twinge of unease. The bar was crowded, chatter and laughter echoing off the brick walls. A few groups clustered around the pool table, while others crowded the bar counter, clutching drinks and talking loudly. Natalie slid into the corner booth, careful to sit where she could see the entire room. She ordered a soda, her fingers tapping lightly against the glass, and leaned back, scanning the room without appearing to do so. Observant, methodical, calculating, it was second nature. She wasn't here to fight, not tonight. She just wanted a quiet moment before heading home. But quiet moments rarely lasted long in Coronado bars, especially when a group of men noticed someone out of place. Across the room, 3 men, a tangle of drunken bravado and poorly concealed insecurity, noticed Natalie. One of them nudged the other. "Check her out," the tallest one whispered, smirking. "She's sitting alone. Probably lost or something." His voice carried just enough for Natalie to hear. She ignored them, pretending to scroll on her phone, but the words made her nostrils flare, not with anger, but with mild irritation at their audacity. "You think she's cute or something?" Another asked, slurring slightly. "Come on, man, let's mess with her." The tallest one laughed, the kind of laugh that makes people in the bar glance over nervously. "Yeah, let's see what she's made of," he said, eyes glinting with mischief. They approached her table, the smell of cheap cologne and beer hitting her before they even spoke. One of them leaned over, resting a hand too close to her shoulder. "Hey there, little lady. What's a girl like you doing sitting here all alone?" Natalie's expression didn't change. Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes calm but alert. She didn't answer. Not yet. She had a moment, a long, silent moment, to assess their movements, their balance, the angle of their approach. All instinct, all training. She knew exactly what to expect from men like this. Loud, aggressive, overconfident. Dangerous if underestimated, harmless if handled correctly. And she had no intention of letting this turn into anything messy. Unless she had to. One of the men, growing impatient, shoved the table slightly, making her drink slosh. "Hey, watch it," she said calmly, standing slowly, hands at her sides but ready. "I said, what's your deal?" The tallest one barked, laughing at the mock confrontation. Then, before she could react, a sudden low blow, a kick directly to her stomach. The force made her double slightly, though her stance didn't break. The bar went silent. Even the background music seemed to falter as eyes turned toward the scene unfolding. Natalie straightened, inhaling slowly, letting her body absorb the impact without pain. Years of core strengthening had taught her how to react. She looked at the man with unflinching eyes. There was no fear, no anger, only quiet, deadly precision. "You really shouldn't do that," she said softly. Her voice was calm, measured, almost eerily so. The words hung in the air, and the men froze for the briefest moment, unsure if she was joking. Then she moved. It was subtle at first. A shift of weight, a tilt of the shoulders, and suddenly the tallest man found himself face down on the bar floor, pinned by an arm he didn't see coming. The second man stumbled backward, gasping, his wind knocked out by a precise elbow to the torso. The third froze, eyes wide, trying to understand what was happening, as Natalie's movements seemed to blur, efficient and unstoppable. No yelling, no wild swings, just control, precision, confidence. The bar erupted into murmurs and exclamations. People stepped back instinctively, some ducking for safety. Drinks were forgotten on tables. Phones came out, capturing what they could. But Natalie ignored the cameras. Her focus was total. She surveyed the remaining man, assessing, calculating. One more step, one more wrong move, and he would learn the lesson everyone else had already learned. You never underestimate someone trained to survive against impossible odds. The bartender, recognizing her, whispered hurriedly to a colleague, "That's Lieutenant Commander Reeves." The SEAL. The words barely left her lips before the last aggressor finally stepped back, his bravado shattered, his mind racing to comprehend what just happened. The room was frozen, tension thick, as Natalie stood calmly, drinking in the silence, her breathing steady. She hadn't needed to raise her voice, hadn't needed to threaten. Her presence alone was enough. Minutes later, the sound of approaching sirens added another layer of intensity. Natalie didn't flinch. The men were still on the floor, staring, stunned, no longer laughing. Someone called the police, thinking a bar brawl had broken out. The irony wasn't lost on Natalie. She hadn't wanted a fight. She had wanted peace. But peace required boundaries, and tonight, boundaries had been tested. She straightened her hoodie, took a slow sip from her drink, and prepared to explain herself to the authorities, calmly, methodically, and without a trace of fear. The bar had changed in 10 seconds. Patrons whispered, recording devices captured every angle, and a legend was quietly born, though no one outside the room yet knew the name. The seconds after Natalie's swift response stretched into an eternity. The bar, once filled with laughter, music, and the rattle of pool balls, had gone completely silent. Glasses clinked accidentally as patrons froze mid-sip, some pressing phones to their ears, recording every moment. The 3 men who had attacked her were sprawled across the floor, gasping, rubbing sore limbs, and staring in disbelief. Their laughter and bravado had evaporated, leaving only shock, confusion, and a creeping realization that they had gravely underestimated the woman before them. Natalie stood still, breathing measured, her posture relaxed yet alert, a predator who didn't need to strike again. Her eyes scanned the room calmly, noting exits, potential threats, and the reactions of the bystanders. Every movement she made communicated control, a subtle shift of weight, the tilt of her shoulders, the faint tightening of her jaw. None of it was aggressive. It was precision. Years of military discipline had honed her instincts so sharply that even in the chaos of the bar, she was untouchable. The tallest man, the one who had initially shoved her, attempted to push himself up, wincing at the soreness radiating through his ribs. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Natalie didn't answer immediately. She waited, letting the silence press down on them, forcing the men to reckon with the consequences of their actions. "You don't want to know," she said finally, her tone calm but cold. "Next time, pick someone your own size." A few patrons whispered among themselves, eyes wide with disbelief. Did she just take them down like that? One murmured. Phones were raised, capturing shaky, wide-eyed footage of the scene. Natalie didn't flinch or glance at the cameras. Fame was irrelevant. The lesson, the reality of consequences for reckless actions, was what mattered. She wasn't here to perform. She was here to assert control, to protect herself without escalating chaos. Suddenly, the shrill wail of sirens cut through the night air. Several witnesses had called the police, worried the confrontation would escalate further. Officers arrived within minutes, lights flashing through the bar's windows. They stormed inside, authoritative voices barking commands. Everyone stay where you are. Step away from the tables. Patrons instinctively obeyed, some ducking behind chairs, while the three men groaned on the floor, their faces pale with shock. One officer approached Natalie cautiously. "Ma'am, step aside, please." Natalie raised her hand slightly, showing she wasn't resisting. She reached into her backpack and retrieved her wallet, pulling out her identification. With calm authority, she handed it over. "Lieutenant Commander Natalie Reeves, U.S. Navy SEAL." The officer's eyes widened as he read it aloud. "You? You're a SEAL?" he asked incredulously. "Yes," she replied softly. "I suggest letting the situation settle without further escalation." Her tone carried no ego, no arrogance, just the quiet assurance of someone who had faced far worse than a barroom scuffle and lived to tell the tale. The officer nodded quickly, signaling for backup. "Everyone, step back. We're handling this." The men who had attacked her stared at her in disbelief. "You? You're serious?" The tallest one mumbled. "You're a Navy SEAL?" His bravado had completely vanished, replaced with fear and shame. Natalie simply nodded once, unblinking. "I suggest you reconsider your choices in the future," she said. "Respect is earned, not demanded." Patrons around the room whispered, some filming discreetly, some shaking their heads in awe. The transformation of the bar's energy was palpable. Where moments ago there had been tension and nervous laughter, now there was awe, respect, and a clear understanding that no one present could have predicted what had just happened. The police began taking statements, first from witnesses, then from the men on the floor. Natalie's responses were concise, factual, and free of emotion. She did not embellish, did not brag. She simply explained what had occurred and why. Every word reflected her military training, precise, clear, and professional. The officers listened intently, exchanging looks of disbelief. They had entered expecting a minor bar fight, and now found themselves managing an encounter involving one of the nation's elite warriors. Meanwhile, the men who had initiated the attack were mumbling apologies under their breath. One tried to argue, "We didn't know." But Natalie's calm gaze silenced him instantly. "You didn't know. Now you do," she said, her voice carrying authority without a trace of threat. The reality of their actions, their recklessness, their disrespect, sank in, heavy and undeniable. The bar's patrons began to murmur again, awe replacing fear. Many approached Natalie hesitantly, whispering admiration. One bartender leaned over and quietly said, "You didn't have to do that. But, wow, you're something else." Natalie allowed herself a faint smile, nodding in acknowledgement but offering no words. Attention was fleeting and irrelevant. She was already considering her exit, aware that lingering too long might escalate unnecessary curiosity. As the officers prepared to escort the men outside, Natalie took a slow, deep breath. The fight, brief as it had been, was already over. The lesson had been learned without further bloodshed. Underestimate her at your peril. In the silence that followed, the bar seemed to hold its breath, as if recognizing the gravity of what had just transpired. The ordinary Friday night had transformed into a moment none present would forget. The night, the quiet woman in the corner, proved beyond doubt that appearances were deceiving. Outside, the sirens continued, but Natalie slipped quietly into the night, blending with the cool ocean breeze. Her mind, as always, was already moving forward. She had neither sought nor desired attention. The lesson was not for fame. It was for understanding, for boundaries, and for the undeniable fact that power was not measured in size, voice, or aggression, but in control. Back in the bar, phones buzzed, whispers turned into discussions, and bystanders replayed shaky videos of the incident. Somewhere, someone uploaded a clip online. Natalie didn't notice. She didn't care. The world could wait. She had lived countless missions, faced unimaginable dangers, and now, simply returning home in one piece, she felt the quiet satisfaction of having done the right thing without spectacle, without chaos, without unnecessary escalation. By the time she walked away from the bar and stepped onto the darkened streets of Coronado, the city had returned to its rhythm, unaware that a legend had just been born. The viral storm, the headlines, the whispers, they would come later. For now, there was only the night, the cool ocean air, and a woman who had silently reminded everyone present that some forces were invisible until provoked, and unstoppable once awakened. Natalie Reeves didn't brag, didn't celebrate, and didn't look back. She had one rule: stay ready, stay calm, and never let foolishness dictate action. Tonight, she had lived that rule perfectly, and the memory of the kick to her stomach would forever remain just that, a spark that had revealed what happens when you challenge someone you never truly understood. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Natalie's small Coronado apartment, casting streaks of golden light across the wooden floor. Normally, she would have been awake earlier, running along the beach or reviewing training protocols for her SEAL trainees. But last night's events had kept her mind alert, replaying every second of the confrontation at the Anchor. A kick to the stomach, 3 men floored, an entire bar holding its breath, all in 10 seconds. She sipped black coffee, her gaze distant, knowing that the world outside was already buzzing with her story. By the time she glanced at her phone, the storm had already erupted. Notifications poured in, hundreds, then thousands, then millions. A shaky video captured by a patron had gone viral overnight. The headline blared, "Female SEAL takes down 3 men in seconds. You won't believe who she is." Her calm, controlled movements, once a private lesson in boundaries, had become an online spectacle. Messages, memes, and reaction videos filled her social feeds. Even though she had asked that no footage be posted, the truth was clear. She had become an accidental viral sensation. Natalie scrolled silently through the reactions. Some were admiring, expressing awe at her skill and composure. Others were critical, questioning whether such force was appropriate off-duty. She ignored the trolls. Their ignorance held no weight for someone who had trained in life or death, scenarios in desert heat and freezing surf. Her focus was methodical, assessing potential consequences for herself, the Navy, and the men who had attacked her. She knew that media attention could spiral into scrutiny, and scrutiny could become distraction, a luxury she couldn't afford. At the Naval Amphibious Base, the Public Affairs Office was already preparing statements. By noon, reporters were camped outside, hoping for a comment from the mysterious woman who had dominated the viral clip. Officers were instructed to confirm her identity without compromising her privacy. Lieutenant Commander Natalie Reeves, U.S. Navy SEAL, one statement read, "The incident is under review, but Ms. Reeves acted in self-defense. No further details are available." Natalie read the statement, nodded slightly, and set her phone aside. The world could talk. She had no intention of feeding the fire. But the incident could not be ignored, and it quickly became the subject of national conversation. Pundits debated her actions, some praising her restraint, others questioning the ethics of off-duty force. "It's impressive," a retired military analyst said on television. But the lesson here is simple. Never underestimate someone with real training. Meanwhile, Clips of the confrontation spread across social media platforms, sparking memes, fan pages, and late-night talk show jokes. Natalie remained untouched by the spectacle, calm, focused, her internal world unchanged by external chaos. Even as she ignored the noise, flashes of her own past intruded. She remembered her childhood in Colorado, raised by a single father who was a retired Marine. Discipline, responsibility, and self-reliance had been ingrained into her from an early age. She remembered running up icy trails, learning to swim in mountain lakes, carrying the weight of expectation before she even understood what it meant. She had been small for her age, often underestimated, but the very challenges others dismissed had forged her into something resilient, something unyielding. Her teenage years were marked by determination and quiet rebellion against limits. She joined ROTC in high school, pushing herself further than anyone expected. She trained her body until it became an extension of her will. And when 9/11s changed the world, Natalie knew what she had to do. She enlisted in the Navy, drawn not by fame or glory, but by the need to protect and serve. She endured Bud-S training, the grueling, hellish course designed to break the strongest men. And she survived, earning her place among the elite few, facing sexism, doubt, and physical trials that would have crushed most. Now, years later, she sat in her small apartment, reflecting on how the bar incident mirrored her life in subtle ways. Just as she had been underestimated in training and early missions, so had those men underestimated her. They had approached with arrogance, thinking size and noise could dominate. Instead, they met precision, discipline, and control, qualities forged in mud, surf, and fire. Natalie recognized that this was not an isolated lesson. The world often judged superficially, assuming weakness where there was strength, naivety where there was vigilance. Her attention returned to the notifications on her phone. Messages of support from women who had watched the clip were especially striking. Many said they had been inspired by her composure, by her refusal to escalate unnecessarily, by her demonstration that real strength was both physical and mental. Natalie quietly considered reaching out to some of these individuals, offering guidance, mentorship, or even just a word of encouragement. But she hesitated. Publicity had a way of diluting purpose. She preferred direct impact over spectacle. Even the men who had attacked her had been identified online. The footage and subsequent reports had made them infamous, their own reputations forever tarnished. Some reached out privately, shame written in hesitant texts, apologies that sounded both genuine and fearful. Natalie had no desire for revenge. She had long understood that power and discipline were not measured by retaliation, but by restraint. The opportunity for justice, should it be necessary, would be handled through proper channels, not spectacle. At the Navy base, Natalie's commanding officers called her in for a meeting. She arrived calm, composed, carrying herself with the same effortless authority she exhibited during the bar confrontation. The briefing room was tense. Questions about media impact, protocol, and potential disciplinary issues were raised. But her superiors already knew her reputation. They had seen her lead, save lives, and maintain composure in situations far more dangerous than a bar fight. By the time she left the meeting, the only acknowledgement needed had been made. Natalie had handled the incident exactly as a SEAL should, efficiently, effectively, and without unnecessary escalation. As the day progressed, Natalie reflected on how quickly life could turn. 10 seconds of action had transformed her quiet Friday night into a national conversation, a viral sensation, and a moment of myth-making. And yet, she felt no pride, no ego-driven thrill. The lesson was simple. Preparedness, discipline, and control were not tools for fame, but instruments of survival. Her training had taught her that when chaos erupted, clarity and calm would always carry the day. That evening, Natalie visited her local gym, not for fitness, but to check on some recruits she was mentoring. She moved among them silently, offering advice, adjusting posture, correcting technique, demonstrating that true strength lay not in display, but in the quiet guidance of others. The viral clip had created headlines, yes, but it was these small, steady impacts on her trainees that truly mattered. She was shaping future SEALs and leaders, teaching them resilience, focus, and the same calm she had relied on during the bar incident. By the time she returned home, the sun had set over the Pacific. The ocean shimmered in the fading light, indifferent to the chaos of human headlines. Natalie stood on her balcony, sipping water, her mind already preparing for the next day, for training schedules, strategy sessions, and the quiet, constant work of molding strength in others. The viral storm, the fame, the whispers of disbelief, these were distractions. The true work, the lasting impact, lay in discipline, mentorship, and living a life aligned with principles forged in fire and tested in real-world trials. Even as the world talked, she remained unmoved, a calm force in a chaotic sea. And deep down, she knew the lesson extended beyond the bar, beyond the viral clip, and beyond the fleeting attention of strangers online. The lesson was eternal. Underestimate someone with discipline, with courage, with years of unbroken training, and you will learn, often too late, why control and strength cannot be judged by appearances alone. Long before Natalie Reeves ever set foot in a Navy training facility, long before she became the woman who could incapacitate 3 men in seconds without a second thought, she was a child in Colorado, running barefoot across rocky trails with the crisp mountain air biting at her cheeks. Her father, a retired Marine with a rigid but loving approach to life, had taught her early lessons that many children didn't encounter until adulthood. Discipline, respect, endurance. These were not suggestions in the Reeves household. They were expectations. From an early age, Natalie had been aware of the limitations others tried to place on her. She was small for her age, yet fiercely determined, with a competitive spirit that could not be subdued. While other children played games for fun, she trained her body and mind with purpose. She climbed trees higher than anyone dared, swam in icy mountain lakes, and ran laps around her small-town streets before sunrise. Her father's voice, steady and unyielding, would echo behind her. Discomfort builds strength. Weakness comes from comfort. In school, Natalie excelled not only physically but academically. She had a sharp mind, capable of calculating angles, observing patterns, and making decisions quickly. These skills were subtle at first, a heightened sense of awareness, a quick reaction when a classmate stumbled or an obstacle appeared. By the time she reached her teenage years, her abilities had become evident. She was disciplined, strategic, and emotionally resilient, qualities that would later define her as a SEAL. Her teenage years were also marked by challenge, frustration, and moments of doubt. She joined her high school's ROTC program, determined to push herself beyond what anyone expected of her. Her peers were often bigger, stronger, or more experienced, but Natalie had something else: sheer determination and the ability to endure pain without complaint. Every early morning run, every obstacle course, every drill was a test, not of strength alone, but of mind, willpower, and focus. She learned early on that true strength required patience and persistence, not just raw power. Win the world. Changed on September 11, 2001, Natalie knew she could no longer remain on the sidelines. She enlisted in the Navy, driven by a desire not for fame, recognition, or adventure, but by purpose: to serve, to protect, and to challenge yourself beyond the boundaries of ordinary life. Boot camp was a baptism by fire. She was small, often underestimated by instructors and peers alike. She faced relentless skepticism, especially as a young woman attempting to enter a domain dominated by men. Some questioned whether she belonged. Others actively tried to break her spirit. Bud S., the Navy SEAL training program, was even more grueling. Cold mornings in Coronado Bay left her numb, freezing water soaking her every layer, sand sticking to wet skin like a second coat. Mud, ropes, and endless runs tested her endurance, sometimes pushing her to the brink of collapse. She endured. Sleep deprivation, physical punishment, and psychological stress that many considered insurmountable. And yet, Natalie persisted. Her body ached constantly, but her mind was sharper than ever. Every challenge became a lesson in control, patience, and determination. She faced ridicule, especially from those who underestimated her because of her gender. She was called names, mocked during exercises, and questioned relentlessly about her capabilities. But Natalie had long learned how to channel adversity into fuel. Every insult, every doubt cast her way became a reason to push harder, to refine her skills, and to prove, not for the critics, but for herself, that competence mattered far more than opinion. By the end of Bud S., she had not only survived, but excelled, earning the respect of instructors and peers alike. Following her training, Natalie's career took her into real-world operations, missions where lives hung in the balance and failure was not an option. Her first deployments were in unpredictable environments, arid deserts, dense jungles, and volatile urban landscapes. Each mission demanded more than physical skill. It required strategic thinking, leadership, and an unwavering focus on the objective. She learned to anticipate danger before it appeared, to read the smallest cues in body language, terrain, and circumstance, and to maintain calm in situations that would break most people. Natalie's first major mission overseas involved a high-stakes operation in Yemen. A group of hostages had been captured by a militant faction, and she was tasked with leading a small team to extract them. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. One misstep could cost lives. The operation was a success. 6 hostages were rescued without loss of civilian life, but the victory was bittersweet. 2 of her team members did not return. Their absence was a haunting reminder that even skill, discipline, and training could not guarantee survival. The loss left scars, invisible to the world, but etched deep in her mind. After returning from overseas, Natalie was reassigned to domestic operations and training commands. Her role shifted from active combat to mentoring new SEAL recruits, particularly those struggling with the physical and mental demands of the program. She became known not for her aggression, but for her calm authority, her ability to inspire respect, and her insistence on discipline over ego. She taught recruits the value of control, patience, and precise execution, often emphasizing that the most dangerous person in any room was not the loudest or strongest, but the one who could remain composed under pressure. This philosophy shaped her in ways that would later manifest during the bar incident in Coronado. Natalie did not seek confrontation, and she rarely displayed her full capabilities unnecessarily. But when tested, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced death, betrayal, and unimaginable pressure. Her responses were measured, swift, and unassailable. Years of discipline had instilled in her an almost instinctual ability to evaluate risk, control escalation, and act decisively, a skill few could match and even fewer understood. Sitting in her Coronado apartment, Natalie reflected on this journey. Every ache in her body, every scar on her hands and arms, every sleepless night during training or deployment had led her to this moment, a moment in which the lessons of a lifetime were applied in mere seconds. The bar fight, brief and chaotic, was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of preparation, focus, and an unwavering commitment to self-discipline. She had not sought to dominate, to prove herself, or to gain fame. She had acted with control, and that control had commanded respect without a single unnecessary word. Natalie understood now what her father had tried to teach her all those years ago. Strength was not loud. It was not visible in outward displays of aggression. True strength was quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. And when tested, it manifested not as rage, but as controlled, precise action. Every challenge, every obstacle, every confrontation was an opportunity to practice that principle. She had applied it countless times in training and in combat. Last night, she had applied it in a simple bar, proving once more that the lessons of her past were eternal, and that discipline and preparation always outweighed arrogance and ignorance. Natalie Reeves had seen the world at its most chaotic. The bar incident in Coronado was in many ways a minor ripple compared to the storms she had navigated overseas. Yet every step of her journey had prepared her for even that brief 10-second encounter. Her most formative mission had been in Yemen, a place where danger was constant and split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. She had been assigned to lead a small SEAL team tasked with rescuing hostages from a militant faction in a remote village. The intelligence was sparse, the terrain unforgiving, and the risks were enormous. Every detail had to be anticipated: the position of enemies, the potential for civilian casualties, the wind direction, even the faintest sounds of movement in the distance. Every member of her team relied on her judgment, and she felt the weight of their trust pressing against her chest like a physical force. The insertion had been at dawn. The desert's chill bit through their uniforms, the sand cold and unforgiving under their boots. Natalie led the team through narrow passes, moving silently, reading the terrain like a living map. Every step, every gesture, every subtle shift in posture was intentional. Years of training had honed her instincts to a near superhuman level. She could sense danger before it became apparent. A footstep on loose gravel, a whisper of movement in a window, the faint smell of gunpowder. The team reached the compound just as the first rays of sun streaked across the horizon. Natalie signaled with her hands, subtle gestures, almost invisible, and her team moved in perfect synchrony. The hostages were located in a small, dark room on the second floor. The door was barricaded, the guards alert. One wrong move could trigger violence and cost lives. Natalie's heartbeat was steady, her mind entirely focused. She didn't think about fear, fame, or failure. She only thought about the mission, the lives depending on her, and the precision required to succeed. The breach was silent and swift. Guards were neutralized before they even realized what had happened. Natalie moved with lethal efficiency, her training and experience manifesting in every gesture. The hostages were freed, guided to safety with reassurance and calm authority. But as the team prepared to exfiltrate, an explosion rocked the compound. One of her closest teammates, a man she had trained with since the first day of Bud S, fell. Chaos erupted in the narrow corridors as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Natalie didn't panic. She directed her remaining team with clear, concise orders, coordinating their escape while keeping the hostages safe. Yet despite their success in rescuing the civilians, 2 of her own team members were lost. The grief was immediate, visceral, and unshakable. She had witnessed death before, but losing comrades in a situation she had orchestrated weighed heavily on her. The victory was hollow, bittersweet. The lessons she learned that day were seared into her memory. Strength without control could be destructive, and power without restraint could have irreversible consequences. Returning home was not relief, but recalibration. Natalie immersed herself in training and mentorship, determined to mold the next generation of SEALs with the lessons she had learned. She emphasized discipline, calmness under pressure, and the importance of controlling one's reactions. Force is only useful when applied with purpose, she would tell recruits. Speed without control is recklessness. Strength without restraint is danger. Every word came from experience, every lesson etched in blood and sacrifice. It was this philosophy that guided her when confronted in the Coronado bar. The men who kicked her didn't know the life she had lived, the missions she had commanded, or the loss she had endured. They saw a woman alone in a public space and assumed arrogance, weakness, or vulnerability. What they encountered instead was a lifetime of training and discipline condensed into action, precise, controlled, and devastatingly effective. The bar fight lasted barely 10 seconds, yet every movement was informed by the hours spent in hostile terrain, the countless drills, and the unspoken knowledge that hesitation could be fatal. Natalie's mind worked in fractions of a second, weighing options, anticipating outcomes, and choosing the path that ensured control without unnecessary escalation. Her actions were not about ego or revenge. They were about maintaining the balance she had cultivated in every mission. Back in her apartment, Natalie often reflected on those days overseas, replaying every detail, analyzing every decision. She knew that trauma and stress could cloud judgment, but she had learned to channel them into focus. The loss of teammates had taught her humility and caution. The lives she saved had taught her responsibility and precision. And the discipline she had honed through years of training had taught her one undeniable truth. When you are prepared, you do not need to fight unnecessarily, but when fighting becomes unavoidable, control is your greatest weapon. Even the smallest confrontations could be lessons if approached correctly. The bar incident, viral as it was, had reinforced what she had always known. Discipline, awareness, and control were more powerful than brute strength, more enduring than fear, and more instructive than punishment. Her philosophy was simple, yet profound. Act only when necessary, act decisively, and let every action be measured by its purpose, not by its spectacle. Natalie's overseas missions also shaped her understanding of human nature. She had seen arrogance, underestimation, and ignorance in hostile environments countless times. Militants, smugglers, even seemingly ordinary locals, often misjudged the capabilities of those around them. She had learned to exploit that misjudgment with precision, never allowing it to compromise safety or mission objectives. In the bar, she faced a similar pattern. 3 men, overconfident and reckless, underestimated her. The lesson was immediate and irreversible. In quiet moments, she considered how the world misunderstood strength, assuming visibility equaled power and loudness equaled courage. Her own life proved the opposite. The strongest, most capable individuals often operated in silence, their abilities manifesting only when necessary. Her body, honed for endurance, precision, and efficiency, was a weapon. Yes, but only one aspect of a broader philosophy that combined discipline, awareness, and patience. As the viral videos circulated and public curiosity peaked, Natalie remained detached from the spectacle. She had no desire for fame. The real work, the true measure of her life, was not in being recognized online or lauded in news cycles. It was in the ongoing preparation, the training of others, the silent mentorship that ensured future generations of SEALs would carry forward the lessons of precision, restraint, and controlled power. The bar incident was a small reflection of a lifetime of learning, distilled into seconds. By evening, the initial viral frenzy had grown into commentary, discussions, and debate. Some criticized her actions, others praised them. But Natalie's mind was already on her recruits, their progress in training, and the importance of teaching focus over force. She reflected on the Yemen mission and other deployments, understanding that every confrontation, from hostile combat to a public scuffle, could be a test of the principles she had lived by. Her actions at the bar were not exceptional in her mind. They were a continuation of the lessons forged over years of adversity and discipline. For Natalie, the true takeaway was clear. Preparation, patience, and control or more powerful than noise, bravado or ignorance. Whether in the deserts of Yemen or the corners of a bar in Coronado, these principles remained unchanged. Every challenge could be met, every threat neutralized, and every lesson taught if one acted with clarity, precision, and calm authority. That night, as she walked along the empty Coronado shoreline, waves lapping gently at her boots, Natalie allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The mission in Yemen, the lives lost and saved, the training, and the bar incident all existed on a continuum, each moment a test of character, skill, and focus. She didn't boast, she didn't celebrate, she simply acknowledged the truth. Preparation and discipline had protected her, guided her, and commanded respect where others had failed to see it. Natalie knew that these lessons would continue to define her life, shaping not only her actions, but her mentorship, her leadership, and her understanding of human behavior. The bar fight, trivial as it may have seemed to outsiders, was a microcosm of her world, testing, measurement, reaction, and control. She had navigated it with the same principles that had guided her through life-threatening missions, proving once more that true power was measured not in force, but in mastery over oneself and one's environment. By morning, Coronado had awakened to a different world. Natalie Reeves' quiet Friday night at the Anchor had erupted into a viral sensation. The shaky cell phone footage captured by a bar patron had made its way onto social media platforms, and within hours, millions of viewers had witnessed the moment the woman calmly and efficiently took down 3 men in mere seconds. Comments, shares, and reposts surged, and within a day, the video had spread across news outlets, online forums, and even late-night talk shows. Natalie sat at her kitchen table, a cup of black coffee steaming gently in front of her, scrolling through her phone with detached interest. Notifications flooded her screen, friend requests, messages, comments, and news articles. Female SEAL floors 3 attackers in 10 seconds, one headline read. Another read, the bar fight that shocked America. Who is this woman? Her eyes scanned the comments, some praising her composure, others debating her use of force. Trolls criticized, memes proliferated, yet amid the chaos, a thread of admiration emerged. Despite the viral attention, Natalie remained calm. Fame, after all, was irrelevant to her. She was trained to operate under scrutiny, to maintain focus regardless of distractions. Her concern was not popularity or reputation, but the practical consequences of the incident, potential media intrusion, the welfare of bystanders, and the Navy's interest. She had learned in combat and in leadership that attention could be both a weapon and a liability. Handling it with precision was essential. The Navy quickly stepped in, aware that the situation had national visibility. Public affairs officers confirmed her identity, but emphasized privacy and professionalism. Lieutenant Commander Natalie Reeves acted in self-defense during a public confrontation. One statement read, "The incident is under review. No further details are available at this time." Natalie had little input. She trusted the Navy to manage the official response while she continued her work and training. Fame was distraction. Mission and discipline were priority. Reporters arrived at the base within hours, cameras rolling, questions shouted, desperate for commentary. Commander Reeves, can you comment on the incident? How do you respond to criticism that you used excessive force? Were you scared? Natalie ignored the cameras and focused on her recruits, coaching them through rigorous drills. Her presence was calm, authoritative, and unshakable. Words were not needed. Her actions, as always, communicated more than any statement could. Outside, the 3 men who had attacked her were now infamous. Footage of their stunned, groaning reactions spread across social media. Private messages of apology trickled in. Some reached out to the Navy. Others attempted personal messages through mutual acquaintances. Natalie did not respond immediately. She understood that accountability was a process. It was not her role to punish through spectacle. Discipline and consequence were effective only when executed with intention and control. In her apartment, Natalie reflected on the surreal experience. Social media reactions ranged from awe to outrage, but the consistent theme was shock. The world underestimated her until it had no choice but to recognize her capabilities. She considered the parallels to her overseas missions, where misjudgment by adversaries often led to critical vulnerabilities. In Yemen, militants had underestimated her team. At the anchor, the men had underestimated her. The result was the same: respect forced by action, not words. As the hours passed, the incident became a broader cultural conversation. Analysts dissected the video, comparing techniques, debating efficiency, and praising her composure. Online forums erupted with discussions about female warriors, SEAL training, and the psychology of restraint under provocation. Natalie observed quietly, detached from ego, understanding that fascination was inevitable but irrelevant. Her focus remained on the ongoing training of recruits and the small, controlled impact she could make in the lives of those under her mentorship. A few days later, journalists began seeking interviews. Natalie granted only one formal statement, concise and intentional: respect is not demanded. It is earned. Discipline and awareness are more powerful than brute force. The statement went viral, often quoted alongside clips of the bar incident. The words reflected her philosophy, honed in years of training, loss, and leadership. Fame could amplify a lesson, but it could not replace experience. She understood that notoriety was temporary, discipline eternal. Meanwhile, her trainees reacted in fascination and admiration. They asked questions, sought advice, and expressed awe at her calm precision. Natalie used the opportunity to teach. She explained that action without purpose was reckless, that discipline was more valuable than strength, and that confidence without preparation was fragile. She emphasized that leadership required composure under pressure, awareness of surroundings, and the ability to act decisively, lessons that extended far beyond the bar or the battlefield. The bar's patrons were still discussing the incident days later. Some had uploaded higher quality footage, analyzed every movement, and created slow-motion breakdowns of her techniques. While the attention was intense, Natalie focused instead on the outcomes. The men were dealt with through proper legal channels. Apologies had been made, and the public lesson was clear. Underestimating someone trained and disciplined could have consequences. The viral storm was spectacle. The principle was reality. At home, Natalie continued her nightly reflections. She considered how her career, from childhood training to BODS to overseas deployments, had prepared her not just for combat, but for unexpected confrontations in civilian life. The bar incident, though brief, was a demonstration of a lifetime of preparation condensed into seconds. She understood that visibility often misrepresented capability, and that the quietest individuals often carried the greatest influence. By the end of the week, interviews, articles, and media coverage had begun to settle. The public had recognized her skill, admired her restraint, and debated the ethics of her actions. But Natalie's focus remained unchanged: her training, her mentorship, and her own personal discipline. Fame was ephemeral. Skill, awareness, and control were permanent. She moved through her days with quiet efficiency, unbothered by the viral storm, observing the world with the same calm detachment she had learned on deployments and in training. She did, however, allow herself one brief acknowledgement. In a private message to a mentor, she wrote, "The world seems to notice only the spectacle, but the lesson is always the same. Preparedness, awareness, and control. Nothing more, nothing less." The message encapsulated her approach to the viral attention. It was an opportunity to teach, not to boast. Fame could amplify understanding, but discipline alone commanded lasting respect. Natalie's life continued in its usual rhythm, despite the viral storm. Training sessions, mentoring, and strategic planning occupied her days, while the world outside buzzed with fascination. The bar incident had proven a principle she had long lived. Chaos could be met with calm. Threat could be neutralized without ego, and respect was earned through mastery, not posturing. Even in the glare of cameras, scrutiny, and public debate, her actions remained consistent with the ethos she had carried since childhood: discipline, precision, and unwavering control. By the weekend, the initial frenzy had started to fade, but the impact endured. Videos were archived, articles referenced, and quotes repeated. Natalie did not track her online presence. She did not need validation from strangers. What mattered was consistency, applying her skills and philosophy every day, whether in training new SEALs, leading missions, or walking quietly along the Coronado shoreline. The viral moment was fleeting. The principles it revealed were timeless. As the sun set over the Pacific, Natalie stood on the balcony of her apartment, the gentle sound of waves below grounding her in reality. She reflected on the irony of the situation. One small action, performed with calm precision, had captured national attention. And yet, it was merely an echo of the countless hours, days, and years of preparation, discipline, and sacrifice that defined her life. Fame was fleeting. Mastery endured. The viral storm was momentary. Her control, cultivated over a lifetime, was eternal. Even as the initial viral storm faded, the echoes of Natalie Reeves' actions continued to ripple through Coronado and far beyond. The bar incident had become a case study in restraint, preparation, and disciplined action. For Natalie, it was far more than a viral video or a moment of public attention. It was an opportunity to teach the principles she had lived by for decades. Every move she made, every decision she took, was guided by the philosophy that strength without control was meaningless. Her trainees at the Naval Amphibious Base noticed the renewed energy she brought into her mentorship sessions. The viral attention had not changed her demeanor. If anything, it had intensified the clarity of her teaching. She emphasized awareness, focus, and the quiet confidence that comes from preparation rather than display. Control yourself before attempting to control the environment, she would tell them, pacing along the obstacle course. Force without discipline is reckless. Strength without purpose is dangerous. Outside the base, the three men who had attacked her in the anchor were still coming to terms with the events. The legal consequences were minor compared to the humiliation and public attention they endured. Court appearances, social media commentary, and personal confrontations with law enforcement had reshaped their understanding of consequences. One of them, the tallest man who had shoved her, sent a hesitant message through an intermediary. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Natalie did not respond personally. Accountability was a matter of reflection and learning, not spectacle or vengeance. The lesson had already been delivered, firmly and irrevocably. The bar patrons, meanwhile, became informal storytellers. They recounted the encounter to friends, families, and coworkers, each retelling adding subtle embellishments, but preserving the essential truth. A calm, disciplined woman had neutralized a threat in seconds. While the world saw the incident as entertainment or amazement, Natalie understood it as a demonstration of lifelong preparation distilled into decisive action. She had not acted for applause or recognition. She had acted to maintain control, safety, and principle. Months later, Natalie began giving occasional talks, not interviews for media, but private sessions for law enforcement, military units, and women's self-defense groups. She focused on situational awareness, restraint under pressure, and the mental frameworks necessary for making split-second decisions. Her emphasis was never on physical dominance alone. It was on anticipation, mental clarity, and calm execution. Those who listened came away inspired, not just by her physical capability, but by the disciplined mindset that informed every movement. In these sessions, she often referenced the bar incident, not to glorify it, but to illustrate a broader lesson. Anyone can react with anger, she would say, her voice steady and calm. But reaction without thought is weakness. Control your body, control your mind, control your environment, and you control the outcome. Her audience, whether seasoned officers or civilians learning self-defense, recognized the subtle power in her philosophy. It was practical, applicable, and rooted in decades of real-world experience. For Natalie, these lessons were also personal reminders. Every day carried the potential for unexpected confrontation, whether in training, on deployment, or simply in daily life. By internalizing discipline, maintaining awareness, and mastering restraint, she had created a mental framework that allowed her to act decisively when necessary, without panic, ego, or hesitation. The bar incident was a crystallized example of these principles in action. Preparation meeting opportunity with calm precision. The public perception of Natalie evolved gradually. What began as viral fascination shifted into respect and admiration. She was cited in articles on female empowerment, leadership under pressure, and tactical discipline. She became a symbol not of spectacle, but of controlled power and quiet confidence. The notoriety was fleeting, but the lessons endured. Those who studied her actions, watched her videos, or listened to her talks recognized a profound truth. True capability is often invisible until it must be demonstrated. As for the three men, the incident reshaped their lives in subtle ways. Humiliation and accountability forced reflection. Some sought counseling, while others pursued constructive paths to rebuild their reputations. Natalie observed these outcomes with a calm detachment. She did not seek to orchestrate transformation. She only understood that consequences, when applied decisively and without ego, often led to self-awareness and change. In this, she saw another lesson reflected, that discipline and controlled action could have ripple effects far beyond immediate events. Back at the base, Natalie returned to her role as mentor and leader. She worked with recruits, ensuring they learned not only technical skills, but the mental fortitude required to navigate high-pressure situations. Situations like the bar encounter were now case studies, illustrating how awareness, patience, and control could prevent escalation and safeguard lives. She stressed the importance of internal calm over external display, teaching recruits that intimidation or loudness rarely substituted for preparation and precision. Her approach was holistic. Physical training, tactical exercises, and combat simulations were always paired with mental conditioning and strategic analysis. Every movement, decision, and instruction reinforced the principle that capability was a combination of skill, experience, and discipline. The bar incident, viral as it was, served as a touchstone, a narrative to illustrate what happens when those elements converge perfectly. Natalie also reflected on her own growth. She recognized that the incident, while minor compared to wartime missions, had highlighted her lifelong ability to navigate the unpredictable. Her body, her instincts, and her judgment were finely tuned instruments, honed through years of challenge, risk, and loss. She understood that mastery was not a matter of ego, but of preparation and self-awareness, an insight that shaped both her mentorship and her own life. Even as the world moved on to other stories, Natalie remained constant. She trained, she taught, she reflected, and she applied her principles daily. Fame, attention, and viral clips were distractions, and she treated them as such. Her focus was enduring: maintain readiness, apply discipline, and act decisively when necessary. Every lesson, from childhood training to bataillons to overseas missions, informed her actions, and reinforced the truth she had always lived by: preparation, awareness, and control were the greatest assets one could possess. The bar incident had also strengthened her understanding of the public's perception of strength. Many admired visible power, yet Natalie knew that true mastery was quiet, patient, and often invisible. Real strength was revealed not in spectacle, but in controlled, precise, and deliberate action. Her philosophy extended beyond combat. It applied to mentorship, leadership, and life itself. Whether on deployment, in a bar, or in training, the same principles held true. By the end of the year, the incident had become a reference point in broader discussions about self-defense, female empowerment, and military training. Natalie did not seek recognition, but she understood that her story could inspire others to pursue discipline, resilience, and awareness. The lesson she imparted was simple: mastery over oneself is more powerful than dominance over others, and restraint is often the ultimate demonstration of strength. In quiet moments, Natalie would walk along Coronado Beach, reflecting on the sequence of events that had led her here. The bar fight, the viral attention, the lessons imparted to recruits, and the broader societal conversation were all part of a continuum, a demonstration of how preparation, discipline, and calm could shape outcomes. She understood that her life, forged through decades of challenge, loss, and dedication, was a living testament to the principles she embodied. Control, focus, and purpose were the greatest powers one could wield. And as she gazed at the horizon, watching the sun dip below the Pacific, Natalie felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The bar incident, once a chaotic encounter, had become a mirror reflecting her life's philosophy. Discipline had triumphed over recklessness, preparation had neutralized threat, and calm authority had commanded respect. It was not about ego or fame. It was about principle, about mastery, and about living in accordance with the lessons that had defined her since childhood. The months following the bar incident had passed with remarkable steadiness, at least in Natalie Reeves' world. Coronado returned to its calm rhythm, waves rolling against the shore, surfers catching the early morning tide, and the military base operating under its usual structured order. Yet the ripple of her actions continued to reverberate, not as fleeting fame, but as an enduring lesson in discipline, restraint, and mastery over self. For Natalie, life had not changed fundamentally. She still rose before dawn to run along the shoreline, the Pacific wind biting against her skin. She still trained recruits, refining their physical skills while instilling the same mental fortitude that had carried her through years of SEAL training, overseas deployments, and life-or-death decisions. But the bar incident had crystallized her philosophy for others in a way that her daily lessons often could not. It was one thing to instruct recruits in drills. It was another to demonstrate, in stark reality, the power of awareness, patience, and calm decisiveness. The three men who had attacked her had moved on, shaped indelibly by the consequences of underestimating someone who possessed both skill and restraint. Natalie had chosen not to engage further. No vengeance, no spectacle, no humiliation beyond what the viral video had already provided. She understood the power of letting lessons be absorbed through consequence rather than confrontation. Accountability, once established, often carried more weight than punishment. Their reactions, private and public, reflected a subtle transformation, a newfound caution, a reconsideration of arrogance, and perhaps an acknowledgement that strength is often invisible until it must be applied. Meanwhile, Natalie's reputation within the Navy had solidified. Superiors and peers alike admired her ability to remain composed under scrutiny, to act decisively without ego, and to mentor with patience and authority. Her role as a trainer and leader grew more prominent. She led workshops for new recruits, shared operational insights, and emphasized mental conditioning as much as physical prowess. Every lesson she imparted was a reflection of her own journey, from childhood discipline in Colorado, through the grueling rigors of Bud S., to the life-and-death operations overseas, and finally to the unexpected test at a local bar. It was in these workshops that Natalie truly left her mark. She explained that true power was not measured in loudness, size, or aggression. It was measured in preparation, patience, and awareness. People often overestimate force and underestimate discipline, she would say. True strength is calm. True mastery is knowing when to act and when to wait. The consequences of action are amplified by control, not ego. Her trainees absorbed these lessons, recognizing that the bar incident was not spectacle, but a distilled example of principles they would carry throughout their careers. Outside the military, Natalie's story began inspiring broader discussions. Articles on social media explored the incident through the lens of empowerment, resilience, and personal discipline. She became a case study in leadership programs, demonstrating that calm decisiveness and preparedness often outweigh reactionary strength. Women seeking guidance in self-defense or leadership turned to her story, seeing in it not just skill, but the embodiment of a philosophy grounded in life experience. Her fame, fleeting though it may have been, now served a greater purpose: education, reflection, and inspiration. Natalie herself rarely engaged with the media. She knew that attention could distort lessons and foster misunderstanding. Instead, she focused on what mattered: shaping future leaders, maintaining her own readiness, and living in accordance with the principles she had learned over decades. Discipline, awareness, and controlled action had guided her through countless trials, and now they guided her through public scrutiny and unexpected notoriety. The viral incident had merely reinforced lessons already internalized, confirming that the philosophy she lived by was effective both in life-and-death situations and everyday confrontations. One afternoon, while leading a training exercise, Natalie paused to watch her recruits navigate an obstacle course. She observed how some faltered under pressure, how others became impulsive in their attempts to dominate the challenge. She approached quietly, offering subtle guidance and adjustment. "Focus," she instructed. "Every movement has purpose. Every action has consequence. Control your body, control your mind, and the environment becomes manageable." Her words echoed her own experiences: months of preparation, moments of high stakes overseas, and the instant judgment required during the bar incident. The men who had been involved in the bar altercation continued their own lives, shaped quietly by their mistake. One eventually pursued counseling and community service, perhaps seeking redemption. Another relocated, choosing distance over confrontation. Natalie never monitored their progress. She understood that the lesson had already been delivered, and that reflection and accountability were personal responsibilities. Her part in the story was not to control outcomes, but to act with precision when necessary, leaving the consequences to unfold naturally. For Natalie, the most profound impact of the incident was internal. She reflected on how her life's trajectory, shaped by childhood discipline, extreme training, and the crucible of overseas missions, had prepared her not for viral fame, but for controlled action under pressure. The bar fight was a microcosm of her life: split-second decisions, high stakes, and the undeniable value of preparation. It reminded her that strength was not for show. It was a tool, to be wielded wisely and with purpose. Months later, a journalist approached her for a retrospective piece. Natalie agreed, but only on her terms. No sensationalism, no exaggeration, only the truth. "People want drama," she explained, "but reality is more instructive. Strength is quiet. Control is not flashy. Discipline saves lives." The article was published widely, emphasizing her philosophy, mentorship, and the broader lessons of the incident. It inspired readers to reflect on their own preparedness, resilience, an approach to conflict. The focus had shifted from spectacle to substance, a transition Natalie had anticipated from the start. At home, she continued her routine. Morning runs along the shoreline, evening reflection on the waves, and diligent attention to her trainee's progress. Her apartment remained simple, functional, and uncluttered, a reflection of the same discipline that guided her decisions. The viral incident, once a chaotic event, was now just one point along a continuum, a demonstration of principle in action, reinforcing lessons that had long guided her life. Years later, when Natalie would look back on that night at the Anchor, she did so with clarity and understanding. The incident had tested her instincts, control, and judgment. It had revealed to the public the power of disciplined action. Most importantly, it had reaffirmed a principle that had guided her since childhood. Mastery over oneself is the greatest strength of all. The world could underestimate her, misjudge her, or challenge her. But discipline, awareness, and controlled action ensured she was always prepared. Her philosophy extended beyond SEAL training, beyond public attention, and beyond moments of danger. It became a guiding principle in mentorship, leadership, and life itself. Natalie Reeves had transformed a fleeting moment of conflict into a lifelong lesson for herself, her trainees, and even strangers who had witnessed it. The bar incident was no longer just an encounter. It was a testament to preparation, control, and quiet power. As the sun set over Coronado, casting golden light across the Pacific, Natalie walked along the shore with a sense of calm satisfaction. Waves lapped at her boots, the wind carried the scent of salt and freedom, and the horizon stretched endlessly before her. She had lived a life defined by preparation, discipline, and purpose. She had faced danger, loss, and public scrutiny with unwavering control. And through it all, she had proven one timeless truth. Underestimate a person who has mastered themselves, and you will learn, often too late, the cost of misjudgment. Natalie Reeves turned away from the ocean, the lessons of her life firmly embedded in every step. Her past, present, and future were aligned with one enduring principle. Discipline and quiet power are stronger than fear, louder than arrogance, and more effective than any display of brute force. The bar incident, virile though it was, had become merely a reflection of her enduring legacy, a legacy defined not by spectacle, but by mastery, preparation, and the subtle authority of one who truly understands strength.